Welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful marketing strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. We have another great episode today, so don't forget to hit subscribe on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Now, here's your host, physical therapist, marketing expert, and CEO of Practice Promotions, Neil Trickett.
Welcome to the PT Marketing Power Hour, highlighting successful marketing strategies from North America's fastest growing clinics so you can learn from their wins and power your practice growth. I'm your host, Neil Trickett, CEO of Practice Promotions, and today's focus is on increasing your word of mouth referrals and going direct to the consumer. So we have a great guest today with us, Colin Sisco here. He's the owner of Kaizen Physical Therapy out in Seattle, Washington. So welcome, Colin. Great to have you on the show with us.
Yeah, thanks, Neil. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And so you've had a lot of success with your clinic, and it's been growing here in the last couple of years. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your practice?
Yeah, so I grew up basically in the greater Seattle area, and just went to college and did PT school down in Southern California. Did my undergrad at Pepperdine University, finished up there in 2006. And then I actually took a gap year between that and PT school and just worked during that year as a full-time aide. And then finished up PT school at USC in 2010. And I've just been in the outpatient orthopedic space ever since. And my practice is just a single location practice, not too far from one of the main universities here in Seattle. And we mainly just serve overuse injuries, post-surgical, and vestibular and TMJ patients. So pretty good mix of patients. And I started it back in 2019. Mm-hmm. And it was actually not like a startup from scratch. There was a clinic in this exact space before I took over. And during that gap year I had, that's when the clinic that was here previously, that's who I worked for as an aide. So they knew me from the past. And at some point we're thinking about retiring and selling their practice. And so right out of PT school, I worked for them, came back, worked for them as a therapist for 3 years. And the clinic was doing okay. It hadn't really grown. So they were wanting to kind of look to see if they could sort of improve the financials of the business a little bit more before having me buy into it. And so they gave me permission to go work for another clinic if I wanted and get some mentoring in that and maybe buy into another clinic. And so not too far away from here, maybe 20 minutes north, I did that for 5 years. And the owner there was thinking of the same thing, like wanting to get out, groom someone to take over. And things didn't really quite work out there. So it was sort of good timing 5 years later, just before 2019, the previous clinic was saying, hey, we're ready to sell and kind of retire. And we'd prefer not to sell to a bigger corporation. And we don't have anyone else internally that would like to take this on. So can we talk? And so we did kind of throughout the spring and summer of 2018. And then I took over January 1st of 2019. So they were a clinic that had somewhere between 100 and 120 visits a week and were remarkably pretty steady there for, I don't know, a good 10, 15 years. They didn't decrease from that much. They also didn't really increase. So, so it was kind of good timing for me. And so that's when I took over.
Yeah. What a great opportunity there. And what a fascinating story to be able to be in a place where you were working as a tech, right? As an aide, and then progressed up to being a PT there. And then eventually you bought the place out. That's pretty cool story. I loved it.
Yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
We kind of have a similar story where I I took a year off too and worked as an aide during that time. I just remember when I was going to school there, it was so hard to get in. You just needed a ton of work experience in order to get into PT school. So that was one of
Yeah.
the things I did. But I think it was really powerful in that you got to really learn a lot, right, from the experience side of it. And then that just helped you have more cases that you could think of in your head when you were in PT school. And obviously
Right.
that made things a lot better. So you walked into something that was really quite good rather than trying to start your clinic from scratch right off the ground. And that one that you were letting me know is that you actually, when you bought into there, was an established practice, right? It had customers
Right.
before, right? And so about
Yeah.
how many customers did they have on their list that you could start with?
Yeah, and that was like the most important thing during the buy and sell agreement was like, how good is this patient list that they have? There was probably like 1,000 physical addresses to start with, and I think there were only about 250 emails associated with those. So we did like a huge mailing like prior to taking over, just announcing the transition. And the emails we did the same. So I feel like it was a pretty good list to build off of.
Yeah.
And that certainly has helped us grow certainly more than 20% despite the pandemic year. So
Yeah. I mean, that was really
yeah,
smart because sometimes, as a PT wanting to start up your own clinic, you think, hey, I'll start from scratch and go with this. Sometimes it's the kind of looking at the finances of having to buy a clinic can kind of be a little gut wrenching.
yeah,
But the thing that you're doing is you're buying that list, right? You're buying the potential for business right away, and so that does get things moving a lot faster for you, and you get more, you're picking up something that's already established. And so that is a good opportunity, and there's plenty of opportunities out there right now where people are looking to transition out, or if they're looking to expand their clinic and build additional locations. Do you want to build that new location from scratch? If it's across town, it's like starting a brand new clinic, or is there an opportunity to buy out someone who has an existing practice that's doing okay, right? And it might be worth
yeah,
that investment. And that's really the number one thing in the sale of a practice. I learned that long ago when I sold my practice is your customer list is
mhm,
the biggest value in the sale, right? Because the assets are not that much when it comes, the equipment and stuff. It's not that much when you look at the total sale price. It's
right.
really the value of the list that you have. Um, and I think one thing that you do really smart, Colin, is that you really leverage and work that list. So I would imagine in your practice, you get quite a few people come back for care.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing I've been trying. Well, the team I have in place now, which is a really great core group of clinical and admin team, is that I try to emphasize, and now I think they really understand it, that if people are coming back for something, whether it's maybe a re-aggravation of the same thing or a brand new thing, that's a really that should be a very good complement to your skill set as a therapist, your soft skills, how you interact with them, the patient experience they had in here. Um, I don't know if you've kind of encountered this before with other therapists that you met, but I still run into a few, actually quite a bit, that there's sort of this thought of like, okay, I've discharged you, I've done all this great stuff. Now, like, hopefully you don't come back. Like, there's that
Mhm.
phrase at the last visit, which we've changed in here of like,
Good,
hopefully I don't have to
good.
see you again. I just like cringe when I hear that. And I'm like, no, it's good if they come back. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's sad if people get hurt, but that's what we're there for. So now everybody for the last year here says, hey, if something else comes up again or you re-aggravate this, like, where to find me. You have our phone number here. Just get in to see us right away. And we can
Yeah.
talk about more of this later in the podcast, but we emphasize the direct access thing a ton to patients. Like that just seems like the easiest thing to tell current patients, because we do get a lot of people that we ask, okay, like when did your pain start? And it's like, oh, like a few months ago. And it's like, have you done anything yet for it? No. And it's like, well, what took you so long? And I said, well, I don't know. I thought about like I had to go downtown to like find parking to see my doctor. And then, it's going to take weeks to get in and stuff happened. And it's like, well, you could have just come right in here. So we emphasize that a ton.
Yeah, that's good, because a
Yeah,
lot of people don't know, right? They just don't
right,
know. And if you say, hey, we're direct access, people don't know what that means, right?
right.
You have to train your staff like you have in that conversation, like, hey, you can just come see me, right?
Yeah,
There's some rules or something you may have to jump through depending on your state, but
yeah,
the bottom line is, like, you can come see me, right? And then we'll handle however we need a prescription or whatever's needed after that.
yeah,
So that's really smart in the way that you've done that. And I think too, like, what you were just talking about, where the therapists are, I think it's a bad habit that's taught to us in school,
yeah,
that if you get a patient better, they should never need you again, or
right.
there's just some interpretation about that. So as owners, we have to undo that bad habit with our team and really let them know that, we're here for the patients. We should be the mechanics of their body, right? We should be the same as like a dental. Imagine if insurance paid for you to have a normal checkup with your physical therapist every 6 months. That
Right.
should be a given, right? So I always made sure that with our therapists, that we were really making sure they understood that, they don't work for the insurance company, they work
Yep.
for the patient, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
We
it's
say the same thing here. Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, so it's so definitely interesting revelations that you're bringing up there. So obviously you do a lot to keep in touch with your past patients. What kind of some of the media and things that you do there to keep it in touch with your patients?
Yeah. I mean, there's, I would say probably the best thing we have going, at least in terms of past patients, is just a monthly newsletter that hits their mailboxes, I think a couple days before the beginning of the month. And I don't know, patients, we get the most feedback on that. Our newsletters currently are being done through Newsletter Pro. Um, but patients like the cover story. I've kind of had to get used to like opening up more as a person and letting people know more about me. So I've gotten more comfortable over the first few years doing that. But they like the articles in there, and there's a section in there where there's recipes, and people tell us they've saved every single one, and how many they've tried out. And in there,
It's quite amazing what a newsletter
yeah,
can do, right? It should be really one of the fundamentals of what you're sending out to communicate with your
yeah,
past patients. And it's a platform where you can communicate so many things that are happening in the practice. It's your opportunity to stay emotionally connected with that patient and to continue to provide value way into the future, that you're an expert to turn to. And it's that constant state of reminding that gets people to take action, to reach back in, to hold
yeah.
on to things that have your brand and your information on it.
Yeah, so we just and inside there we just have an insert that promotes something that we're really highlighting that month. So that could be like a new treatment we have. Maybe we're doing like a fundraiser for something, or a therapist just took a new Con Ed course that we're excited to try techniques with. And so I definitely say that monthly newsletter is awesome. We don't email our newsletter. We do post it to our Facebook page, which is good. But we also do email our patients a couple of times a month. And we try to just alternate that between one just kind of nice goodwill kind of email that's like, hey, here's like top 3 exercises for knee pain if you happen to be having that. And we'll also announce something like maybe laser therapy, promote that, maybe a free exam day. That's a major winner for us, like twice a month prior to a slow season, is to promote a free exam day to past patients. And if they have friends or family members they want to take advantage of that, we promote that as well. When patients are done, there is a handwritten letter on like a 9x4 card that we just acknowledge their hard work in PT, and we try to make it sound as little like a form letter as possible. So have some particular details in there that they talk to us about, so they feel like it's really personal. We'll send those out on birthdays as well. And then at the end of the year, or actually usually the beginning of the year, we mail a copy of patients that go on our wall of fame here in the clinic. So a little picture of them and the team, and a little testimonial they wrote up. So we just mail a copy of that at the beginning of the year for anyone that was on the wall previously in the past year. And through all these different like touch points, we're asking them if they can refer someone to us, or also just ask if any previous things we've treated them for are acting up again, or if anything new has happened. Because it is amazing, even people that have seen you a lot in the past, even though they have that experience, they'll develop some new ache or pain. And for whatever reason, just your clinic, and even though they had great experiences, it doesn't immediately pop into their head like, oh, I need to get over there. So sometimes these touch points have caught patients like a couple weeks into something flaring up again, or some new ache or pain, and that sort of reactivates them and gets them to come back in. So
isn't it funny? Like you could be working on a patient for their knee, and they just think that you're the knee therapist, right?
Oh, that happens all the time.
You see that,
yeah,
like that patient next to you getting worked on their neck or their back. Oh, I didn't know you worked on necks or backs.
Yeah,
oh yeah.
that happens all the time. I'm like if we only treated knees, like, we'd be full 20% of the time maybe. And but it is funny. But sometimes when a lot of patients are coming in with multiple aches and pains at the same time, and we don't always have time to address more than one. So we do that a lot. Like when they finish up with one case, depending on their insurance visits, how many they have left in that situation, we'll just have them, if they want to, we'll just move on to another body part and work on that. So that's one thing that's helped keep our schedule full at times, is just telling people like, hey, if you want to take a break and we'll come back and address this other area again, that's fine. But if you would prefer, let's take care of this other part now. And so yeah, but it is funny. Yeah, they don't realize that you can treat multiple areas. So
I think looking, kind of what you're telling me here, I really like the way that you approach working with your team, right? Working with your other therapists to train them, and realizing that, they need to be instilled with some marketing knowledge and what they should be asking for from the patients, right? Kind of like, I just found that with working with many therapists over the years, is people are really talented, right, in what they do, but they never went to school for marketing, right? They never went to school to kind of, they sell a plan of care, but they don't know how to like sell fully the services, right? Or the opportunities available to that patient, to a family member. And you get some people who are naturally better at it than others. So it's being able to identify in your team, like who's strong in these areas, and then who needs more help. And certainly I can see that you've done that a lot with your team, which is fantastic.
Yeah. It's actually a lot of fun. There's a lot of work that goes into it, a lot of like behind the scenes, like identifying and prepping to like paint the picture for those team members, and then present it to them, and get the point across that resonates with them, where they're going to take action. And but I have found it to be quite rewarding, and all that behind the scenes prep work that no one else really sees makes a big difference in the long run for the practice. That way you're not constantly having to like repeat the same message over and over again. So
yeah. But yeah, usually if you could say this to anybody in your practice, right? Like, everybody should be able to answer, like, whose job is marketing, right? It's everybody's job, right? And so getting the team to really understand that, think of that fantastic patient you've had the opportunity to work with, and you've been really happy with who they are. Wouldn't it be great if they replaced themselves with someone just like that? Right. And you can imagine having a clinic full of people just like that patient, who are super enthusiastic and happy and doing their home exercise programs. Like, we can have more of those people, but we got to ask for them. right? And so
Yeah.
just simple like scripts and phrases and things that the staff can say, right, from the front desk to the therapists, it creates a rich experience throughout care, right? So people are really excited by the
Right.
time they leave, but then they know what to say to friends and family and colleagues in order for them to open the door, right, to start a communication with the clinic, to start that marketing line, and then have an opportunity to come on in, right?
Yeah, definitely. So, um, yeah, so there's at our weekly staff meeting, there's usually some discussion along what people have done to kind of improve that experience in the past week. And that's definitely, we definitely make a point to acknowledge that. And the staff really appreciates that, and it makes them feel like they're really contributing to the growth of the clinic. So, yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. And that also, I know there's a lot of difficulty right now for PT clinics with hiring, right, and retention. And so one of the things to really help with that is where a therapist or staff member feels like they belong, right? And the way that they feel like they belong is not just that they show up and just treat patients; it's that they're part of a lot of different decision making within the clinic, right? That they're contributing to lots of different things being successful at the clinic. And so, if you're empowering them, if you're training them, if you're keep in this way, having like in your staff meetings, everybody participate in what they've done to help bring more new patients and reviews generated, uh, um, number of planet cares that have been completed, then they feel, hey, it's not just numbers, but like, oh, as a whole, I'm really helping the whole company do well. And so then that helps with retention and longevity for the team
Yeah.
members for sure.
Yeah. So I definitely, as soon as we started making that little change, just acknowledging some wins and recognitions for that, yeah, things definitely, got even better. So it
Awesome.
makes a big difference. Yeah. If you point those out.
Yeah. And so,
Yeah.
Kaizen PT here is coming up on your 3-year anniversary, right? So congratulations on that. And so what are some
Yeah.
of the things that you would have say that you've learned about being a PT owner and entrepreneur over these last 3 years?
Ah, boy, it was like, it's funny, like some of the neighbors that I talked to in my neighborhood, they'll ask like how things are going. And I always kind of joke like, yeah, wasn't really the best idea to buy into a clinic like a year or so before a pandemic. Like that was not the most fun to have no business marketing experience ahead of time and like navigate that. Um, we're definitely like thriving again. I'm really thankful for that. But yeah, looking back, it was yeah, definitely a crazy time. And I remember watching this interview years ago of Gail Sayers, a former Bears running back from like the 60s. And he was interviewed talking about like, oh, you were this star college player and also in the NFL. And is there any, like, what's the biggest difference in, going from college to the pros? And he was saying that like even if you're a star in college, he's like to go to the NFL and succeed, it's about like a Grand Canyon wide like gap in terms of making that leap. And for me to go from great therapist only to now owning a business and navigating it and having it survive through a pandemic, I would definitely say that the Grand Canyon wide analogy was pretty true.
The good thing is you're
But
not alone, right?
yeah.
There's many, many other practice owners who are with you. They're in the same boat, and it's amazing to be able to do that and survive probably one of the hardest points in being a business owner in history. Um,
Right.
but you've done it, right? And you're stronger for it, and now the future you're just going to be wide open for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I think the main things I've learned are also that PTs are generally afraid of the word marketing or the idea of selling themselves. And there does seem to be this thought of like, well, I want to get paid, but I'd gladly give my services away for free. And I've done a good job, I think, at kind of getting the team on board and changing that viewpoint. And just a lot of PTs don't really view their service they provide as, they just don't think of it in terms as like a valuable service. They know they're helpful. They know they put all
Mhm.
this time and work and money into getting their education and developing those skills. But I've definitely learned they don't always see what they do as valuable to the patients from like a financial perspective. And so I always talk all the time that really patients, they're paying for the long-term outcome that they're going to get from you. So there is sort of a financial value to the service that you're providing. And PTs, they don't really know metrics that well or how it all goes into the financial stability of a practice. So there are some key metrics and financial numbers that we share with the clinic that gets everybody, I think, on board with what needs to happen. And the PTs here, they know the clinic's cost per visit,
Mhm.
and why it's important now to have at least close to a 20% profit margin if you can. And um, what happens if that dips way too low, and like what are the consequences of that, and how can they help out to make sure we're reaching those profit margins. But yeah, definitely, yeah, I've learned that,
Mhm.
yeah, a lot of PTs just don't know that. So I've spent a lot of time just working with the team to get them up to speed on why those things are important, why we go
Yeah,
over
I think
them.
what you're saying there though is really important for many practice owners out there, and is that have some transparency in your business, right?
Yeah,
And sometimes we're afraid to share some of the financials with the team, but
right,
realize that if they're in the absence of data, people make things up, right?
right,
So if you're not being transparent, if you're not sharing a decent amount of financial information in terms of like how the business is doing that the team is part of, then they might think, hey, we're doing fantastic and I can ask for that raise now, or
right,
I should be getting this much, and then it causes conflict internally, right? So again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, where you're trying to create loyalty, you're trying to create longevity with therapists and have them grow with you and have opportunities in the future. They have to know what the business is doing, right? And how
right,
what they're doing contributes to the financial aspect. And I think it's very helpful in PT that we speak in terms of people, right? And so, like, for example, like at practice promotions, we don't say in our team like website traffic, right? Or website visitors. We're talking about like people visiting the website, right? There's
yeah,
actual people who are visiting your website. And so the same thing in PT, it's not just like patient visits or new patients. It's like how like new opportunities to help people, right? Or
right,
how many people have we helped this week? So kind of putting in that perspective, and then also like helping them see, hey, if we're getting paid properly here, how valuable do you think you are, right? How valuable do you think your services are, and get them to really own that financial aspect. And just like you, when I had my practice, we worked a lot with the staff just to show them like what does it cost per visit to actually run the clinic, right? And they
right.
were like, whoa, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's this thought like if you're just the PT or the admin staff that like, oh, the owner's just like breaking in all this like money. And I'm like, no, like here's our cost per visit, and here's all the expenses, like what went into it.
Right.
And so then they're like, oh, okay. Then yeah, then they get it.
Yeah.
So
And if you relate it if you went to see your orthopedic doctor, if you went to go see you know a cancer specialist, like you would pay for it, right? Because
right.
you need that, right? And your patients need what you give. And so that a lot of times you're going to have to just repetitively ingrain that into them, and then they start to get that. So
Yeah, that's another thing I've learned too, is that the onboarding experience you do with new hire or people that when I took over the business, um, that things have to be kind of repetitively discussed over time, that there's this sort of continuous onboarding, even with staff you've had for years, just like a review on things. And so, yeah, that's definitely something I've learned, that you can't just say it once and then think it's going to go how it's going in your head as an owner.
Yeah.
So, so we kind of have these quarterly, like, I guess they're like quizzes, if you will, like, just on certain procedures or SOP things here in the clinic. Like, how do you ask for a Google review? And like, why do we do this? And I was surprised in the past sometimes, thinking, oh, they would say what I'm expecting them to, and it was like totally off. And like, oh, okay, so I have some work to do to like get them back on the same page so they understand, what we're doing here and why. So the
Right.
continuous onboarding is something I didn't expect, but I've certainly learned over the last few years.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's I think that's valuable for any practice owner out there, just realizing that, you're marketing and selling your team all the time. And the bigger team gets, the more you have to market and sell what you're doing and all the things that need to happen in there. So repetition is the key in marketing for sure. So the same thing with your team, you got to keep that repetition going. You got to keep that message and keep beating that drum, right? And then people start to get on board at different times, because everybody's different, right? Different personalities. So
Yeah,
you do a lot of things
definitely.
too, like motivating staff. Like, what's some of the key things that you do to help motivate your staff?
Yeah, we just like to, as I said earlier, the main thing is just pointing out their wins and recognitions on a weekly basis. They feel like, oh, like Colin's been paying attention to things I'm doing, and highlighting those wins that they're helping with. We also, any new Google reviews that come in, or new Wall of Fame testimonials that go up, I just read those out to the staff, and so they really like hearing that. And because sometimes when those reviews come in, the therapist doesn't get notified. They don't get the email saying someone left a review or anything.
Yeah.
So we read those out. That really helps them. We definitely like to have like a quarterly outing of some kind that the staff decides on. We've given like a couple extra days off here and there if there's certain metrics that are met in the clinic that are realistic and achievable, that help grow the business. And yeah, just little things here and there. I think just acknowledging that their wins,
I think that main thing
goes
there,
a long way.
What you're talking about though is bringing it back to the purpose of the clinic, right? And aligning everybody to that purpose of helping people, right? And so, like you said, that a lot of times the therapists are not going to see a Google review that came in. The billing person's not going to see a Google review that came in, or testimonial that was handwritten or left by one of the patients. So the more that is shared on a weekly basis, the more, again, everybody feels like, hey, we're doing great work here. We're helping people, get out of pain and get back, to life. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So in closing here, Colin, any results that you're especially proud of that you'd like to share?
I think just for being a fairly new owner, I'm probably pretty proud of just being able to like step back and not micromanage my staff, and just kind of empower them to take ownership of their role, and just, to be an entrepreneur or business owner, you've got to kind of sort of mentally budget for, like, things are not always going to go exactly how you want all the time. When you're just your own PT, you have like full control over what you're doing. And so yeah, just kind of sort of mentally budgeting for the fact that, there's going to be some onboarding that needs to happen. And knowing, mistakes are going to happen, and just kind of keeping things positive and not immediately being reactionary. I feel pretty proud to have gotten the team on board and understanding the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's a huge accomplishment right there. I mean, I think, from what you have been saying today, it's clearly evident to you, and also from your success, just like you really empower your staff, right? And I think that's that's the only winning way forward, is to build your team, empower your team, and let go, right? And let them do their thing, because that buys you time and buys you freedom and opportunities as a practice owner, right? Because you don't want to be the person that makes everything go. You need a team to be able to do that, so you can
Yeah.
enjoy the fruits of your labor, right? And your investments.
Yeah, definitely. And I kind of got this, I guess, managerial style from a book called Turn the Ship Around, um, by a guy named David Marquette, former like Navy submarine commander. And he was on one submarine one time, a new one that he had taken over. And it was a crew that was like underperforming in terms of standards. And I remember he reading in the book, he was telling his right hand person to, basically shout out some order to a junior officer. And I think it was like, he told him like move the submarine 2/3 ahead, which is just like a certain speed on the sub. And the junior officer didn't do anything. He just kind of sat there. Um, and of course, David's like, well, like, hey, what's going on up there? Like, why aren't you doing this? And the junior guy's like, well, like, sorry, but there's no 2/3 setting on this ship, this sub. And so he turns to his second in command. He's like, did you know this? And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, why did you tell this guy to do this if you didn't know, it was gonna be possible? And he said, well, you told me to. Like, I just give orders, like, So I was like, okay, well. And I actually have found, like, when I originally took over, most people, I don't know if they were just like raised that way in their families or a lot of previous jobs they had. It was just sort of like a do what you're told, like don't question. But it was just sort of my experience, especially my first year, that's sort of the culture that was here,
Mm-hmm.
that I walked into. And I just realized, like, I can't be the one like always coming up with the answers all the time to every
Right.
situation, or have everybody coming to me for every little fire that happens. So I just kind of took it upon myself to like step back and take my time, knowing it wasn't going to happen tomorrow overnight, but just kind of methodically chip away at getting people on board to take ownership over things. And that when something comes up, like, tell me what you think we should do.
Mm-hmm.
And I made it really clear. And this is one of the things I had to probably emphasize at least on a monthly basis, which was like, hey, if you take a stab at something and it doesn't work out, like, you're not going to get fired. Like, no one needs to worry about that. Even if it doesn't go well, like, we
Right.
can just regroup, come up with a new strategy, and move forward. And I still think people to some degree are kind of always like worried about that, like
Mm-hmm.
not quite taking 100% ownership. But the crew I have in place now, they do that really, really well.
Awesome.
And so I think that's something I'm pretty proud of. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and
Yeah.
congratulations on that for making that happen, because it does help so much. And I think one piece of advice for any practice owner out there is, and I learned this from a friend a long time ago, is you got to be the Teflon pan, right? So anybody wants to give you problems or like, hey, solve this problem for me. The golden question is, well, what do you think we should do?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So give it back to them. Well, what do you think? That's always, so my staff always jokes that about me is I'll say, well, what do you think? Right.
Yeah.
And that means that they have to come up with their own ideas, own suggestions, own advice. But it works,
Yeah.
right? And that gives you strength as an owner, not having to being the sole decision maker. And the bigger your clinic gets, the more you're going to need managers and team members to make smart decisions. They can't be all on your shoulders. So Colin, any parting words of advice here for our audience?
Yeah, I would say just, I think in a nutshell, just market like crazy, to however big your past patient list is. Just do that in as many forms of media as you can. just to try to reactivate those past patients to new plans of care, or to ask them to refer people to you. It just seems like the easiest thing to do. Tell them that they don't need to necessarily get a referral depending on your state. And yeah, just be super creative, I guess, with generating as many word of mouth referrals as you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, great advice
Yeah.
there. It definitely is the gold mine in your practice, right? It's your customer list. And so you've done a fantastic job of leveraging that, nurturing that. And obviously it's a big part of your success, and I'm sure it will be way into the future. So
Yeah.
thanks so much, Colin. Really appreciate all the advice you've given our audience here, and wishing you much success here in 2022 and beyond. So thanks for being on the show.
Thanks, Neil.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks.
Thanks again for joining us today. Be sure to check out practicepromotions.net/power. There, listeners can download over 9 checklists and free resources made to coach you through simple, proven marketing actions to increase new patients. So check it out today. That's practicepromotions.net/power, and I'll see you next time.